What will happen to our purchases if one of the prices or all the prices of goods and services nag-change? So of course, a change in the price of a good alters the slope of the budget constraint or changes the slope of the budget line. It also changes the MRS at the consumer's utility maximizing choices. So when the price changes, two effects come into play, the substitution effect and income effect. So what is a substitution effect? So even if the individual remained on the same curve when the price changes, his optimal choice will change because the MRS must equal to the new price ratio. Ibig sabihin, for example, between goods X and Y, if the price of good Y increases, then he may choose to buy less on good Y and purchase more on good X. And take note, the only way for the consumer to increase the consumption of good X is by decreasing the consumption of good Y in order for him or her to be on the same indifference curve. That's substitution effect. The consumer substitutes Y for X because Y now is more expensive. The price change alters the individual's real income and therefore he must move to a new indifference curve. Kumbaga, sa income effect, as price of Y increases, so ano yung effect niya to your limited income? The effect is that you are now poorer than you were before. Or ibig sabihin, your purchasing power, or yun yung tinatawag na real income, is now lesser, or yung 200 mo na income can now buy fewer quantity of good Y because Y is now more expensive. Okay, let's illustrate now the two effects, substitution and income effects. Okay, suppose the consumer is maximizing utility at point A. So point A is the optimum point or the utility maximizing point because the budget line and the indifference curve ay nagtangent. So the situation is that if the price of good X falls, the consumer will maximize utility at point B. The decline in the price of good X is represented by the rotation of the budget line to the right. Diba? Ito yung initial budget line. Then, as price of X decreases, so the budget line now rotates to the right. And hypothetically, the new optimum point is at point B. What happens to the quantity of X? Since the price of X now decreases, then by substitution effect, consumer will buy more X. Then by income effect, the consumer, since good X is now cheaper, then the purchasing power or the real income of the consumer is now here. So quantity of good X further increases. So again, if we decompose the two effects, by substitution effect, tumaas yung quantity of X. And by income effect, tumaas din yung quantity of good X as the price of good X falls. So the total increase in X is equal to this area. So if we can exactly solve for the value of X, so it is equal to this area. The total effect is equal to this income effect plus the substitution effect. Now let us decompose the two effects of a price change. So here we will identify the substitution and income effects as price of good X falls. We will identify first the substitution effect. So to isolate the substitution effect, we hold real income constant but allow the relative price of good X to change. So as we can see in the budget line rotates to the right. Since good X now is cheaper, so there's a tendency of the consumer to substitute or to consume more X rather than good Y. So from point A, the consumer will now purchase or will choose bundle C, for example. So we'll denote that as bundle C. So from point A to point C, the quantity of good X at the new bundle is now higher compared at point A. So this is now what we call the substitution effect. Take note at point C, that combination of X and Y lies on the same indifference curve as point A. So that means that at point C or at point A, the level of utility of the consumer is the same. Because again, at point C, although the quantity of good X increases, the quantity of good Y naman ay bumaba. So again, the movement from point A to C is called the substitution effect. How about the income effect? The income effect occurs because the individual's real income or purchasing power changes when the price of good X falls. Consumer now can buy more quantity of good X because its price decreases. So along the new budget line, okay, we can create a hypothetical new optimum point, right? So let's say point B. Point B is the new optimum point as the price of good X decreases. From the lower indifference curve, which is U1, the new combination now is at point B, which is at the higher indifference curve. And at point B, the indifference curve U2 and the budget line are tangent. And notice also that we have here a broken line, violet colored broken line. This is being illustrated to show that at point C, merong parang temporary na optimum point, kumbaga, or imaginary na optimum point as price of good X falls. And notice that this violet colored budget line is parallel to the new budget line, right? From the imaginary budget line or from this broken line to the new budget line, parang nag-shift, yung effect ay parang nag-shift yung budget line. And again, that is because the real income or the purchasing power of the consumer changes. So the movement from point C naman to point B shows that the quantity of good X further increases. So all in all, again, the total effect is from point A to point B. So we can say that in this situation, good X is a normal good. Another situation, we assume that the price of good X now increases. So, halimbawa ito yung initial budget line. And the initial optimum point is at point A. It is where the initial budget line and the initial indifference curve are tangent. As price of good X increases, then the new budget line now rotates to the left. The movement from point A to point B is the total effect. Nag-decrease yung quantity of X. Since the price of good X now is expensive, then the consumer will buy more Y instead of X. Or by substitution effect, the new bundle for X and Y is at point C. And again, point C or point A gives the same satisfaction of the consumer because they lie on the same indifference curve. So the movement from point A to point C is called the substitution effect. And at point C, again, we will construct an imaginary budget line which is tangent sa U1. And since the price of good X now is higher, the purchasing power of the consumer declines. So as a result, from point C, the quantity of good X further decreases to point B. The movement from point C to point B is called the income effect. So we can conclude here again that good X is a normal good because as purchasing power of the consumer declines, the quantity of good X also declines. So if a good is normal, so ano yung idea na nakuha natin? If a good is normal, substitution and income effects reinforce one another. So if a good is normal, the direction of substitution and income effects are the same. When price falls, both effects lead to a rise in quantity demanded. And when price rises, both effects lead to a drop in quantity demanded. So yun yung nangyari kay good X. What about if the good is not a normal good? So if a good is inferior, then substitution and income effects move in opposite directions. So by substitution effect, tumaas yung quantity of good X. And by income effect, bumaba yung quantity of good X. So opposite yung direction. If the good is inferior, the combined effect is indeterminate. Ibig sabihin, when price rises, the substitution effect leads to a drop in quantity demanded, but the income effect is opposite. Or when price falls, the substitution effect leads to a rise in quantity demanded, but the income effect is opposite.